Yo, what's up, guys? It's Aragon. Welcome back to another video about 4A series. Just kidding. Um, it has been a while. I need to close Desmos. But we have a new suspect, Archaludon, again. I honestly don't remember if, I talked about this at length on the channel back when this one was last suspected. I believe it was, April, March of 2024. Well, it's now February of 2025. A long time has passed. The circumstances have changed surrounding Archaludon. This has been a very strong Pokemon for a very long time. And developments have taken place that have basically led to this Pokemon coming back. So I thought I'd just make a quick video here. I don't know how long it's going to be. I like to yap, so it might last a while. But anyways, Archaludon suspect. So hold on one second. Okay, back. Anyways, but yeah, Archaludon, very strong Pokemon. Has been kind of like a staple of DOU ever since it got released. I think when we first saw them on, right, we saw Meteor Beam, but it doesn't need a power herb. And I mean, obviously it was really good. Stamina. It's honestly just incredible what all the things they gave this mon. But when it was first legal, Flutter was around, DOA was around. It didn't really make that big of a splash. It was a good mon, but I think we also weren't using it correctly. But after the two big special attackers went, Archaludon was the next in line. It was midway through DPL. Got suspected. However, the consensus kind of was it was a really strong mon, and maybe had potential to be kind of broken, but it wasn't really being used. The things weren't developed enough, and you just needed more time to tell if this mon really had to go or not. And that was a pretty popular opinion. I don't actually remember what the margin was, but I don't think it was particularly close. I voted do not ban. In hindsight, it might have been better to vote ban. It was kind of clear the mon had potential to be very good, very silly, but at the time it was just kind of a hard call to make. It was just not for context, popular sets at the time were often leftovers. We saw sets that were Iron Defense Body Press with stamina. That Iron Defense Body Press set is not very good, and I think that really confused people. To be honest, for a really long time, it's just not really how you're meant to use them on. For better or for worse, someone really wants to be on rain of some sort, whether it's manual rain, but far and away. Anyways, tangent. But very strong mod. But it escaped ban the first time around, 8 to 26. This was a very quick suspect. It was not particularly close. I'm not really sure how many people qualified, but yeah, it was 42 is crazy. I feel like there's way more now. Let me double check that. Let's see. But yeah, it's escaped a ban, strong mon, but it was using a lot of underdeveloped teams. There's a Z video that came out a couple days ago that I think discussed some of those early teams in more detail, but those teams were not very developed, right? So we have this mon, very strong part of the metagame, especially after Flutter got banned. But again, it was hard to tell. The other conflicting factor here is it's not there aren't mons that can hit Arch hard, right? I think Spadef investment, heavy Spadef investment was always popular on it. But that still doesn't stop powerful ground types Lando Eye. Lando Eye is actually probably the best counter to Archaludon that's not restricted in the entire national decks. And we happen to have it in SV, so that's kind of fortunate for dealing with Arch, right? That being said, you have to be really careful about positioning your Lando and all this stuff. So anyways, after this first suspect, for all those reasons that why it remained legal, Archaludon actually kind of fell off the map for a while. Let me just pull up my SV builder really quick. Please, no one steal my teams. Actually, that's fine. I haven't even built anything this week. You'll love to see it. Yeah, the number one team's an OU team because it was Mimi and OU against Psalm last night. Okay. We'll just open the World Cup folder. They got a lot of teams in here. But so Archaludon kind of fell off the map over the summer last year. And that was like kind of a product of like a really offensive, especially heavily oriented metagame, especially during Derby. There was a lot of like Reggie Drago torn stuff. That was like really a defining feature of that metagame. And Reggie Drago is still like a really strong mod, but during that metagame, Arch kind of like fell off the map. There were a lot of DOU players that are like mainstays that really just like were not playing the tier at the time. I did not play the tier like pretty much at all from like February 2024 through like September 2024. So like for me personally, it was a long time. But like I said, I didn't vote ban because I felt like the mod hadn't been developed. To be honest, that aged poorly, right? So, anyways, the stage, it's SCL, right? The biggest DOU tournament of the year. That's a team tour, or the biggest tour that DOU is a part of. One DOU slot per team, 10 teams. Usually like 10 of the best like DOU players around, etc., etc. And unsurprisingly, like a lot of like people that like hadn't been playing the tier for like a while came back, saw Pokemon like Archaludon, right? So got a lot of new players, or not really new, but like experienced players coming back to the tier. And so we saw a lot of metagame development, and there were a few things that like really took place in SCL that are important here. The first is like a lot of POW usage. Like POW became like, POW was always good, right? But like entering SCL, the big stuff at the time was like Torn plus Landowai, Genie's offense with like Reggie Drago, all these ice type weak Pokemon. And so POW stuff kind of came in and was like really popularized, had like an absurd win rate in SCL, because like the tier at the time, like the stuff people were using was just like not really adequately prepared. Like it just had a good matchup into a lot of the common teams. So POW was up during SCL. That's metagame development number one. Well, you know what happens when POW is good? Pokemon that beat POW become really good. So like there are two mons in this tier that uniquely punish like physical offense. One of them is DNC. DNC just like absolutely farms POW D-Knight plus like any other combination of physical POW mons. Like, you get the point. The other is Archaludon. And Archaludon is a little bit more of a overtly broken Pokemon than DNC is, right? So Archaludon was already a Pokemon that like we thought was really good, had the potential to be broken, but hadn't like really had its time in the moment, really. Like it was around again, but not in the spotlight for a while. But with POW being on the rise and like more people like looking to innovate with Arch, Rain became much more developed. So what do I mean by that? So Rain was like kind of down for a while. Like Rain is just like Arch plus like support mons, whatever. Like the problem is to use Rain, you got to use Politoed or Pelipper, and like those mons are like not the greatest. Like they're okay. Like water types are rare, but they're so Rain just hadn't been like fully developed. Like the big thing that happened in SCL was pairing Sinistcha with Archaludon, and now this is not a completely revolutionary concept. Sinistcha's been a good mod for like forever, but the thing that these like new Arch Cine teams found a way to do. Let me see if I can find an example in here. It's in here somewhere. But the thing that these new like Arch Cine teams managed to do was kind of like get around like the Sinistcha issue of like struggles to play into offensive teams. So this was one team built by Z, used by Burns in SCL, very popular team. Standard Arch Cine stuff. So like the combination of these two mons is like the first big thing that really started to shift things when people come to like look at Arch, right? You look at like Archaludon and Sinistcha, these Pokemon have almost like complete like type synergy. Like Sinistcha obviously like resist grounds, can redirect ground, except for like Sandsear obviously. And like Archaludon, like everything that like hits Sinistcha like is like basically walled by Archaludon. And here's where like Archaludon really just became stupid. So Archaludon's big thing with stamina, like you take damage, you get stronger, you get harder to remove, right? Now in faster paced formats, that's like usually not as big an issue. Like you can just like chip it down over time and get rid of it. That's like kind of how it is in VGC. Um, like I played a lot of Reg H, or I didn't really play a lot of Reg H, but like when I played Reg H at like the regional I went to in November, like Archaludon like was annoying, but you damage it over time. Like even if you're dealing less damage over time, you eventually knock it out. In DOU, that's just like not the case. Like Sinistcha is a much better Pokemon. Pokemon that are harder to remove are much easier to support in DOU. You could build a like more of a support structure around it than you can get away with in VGC. That's like why Annihilate is banned, for instance. So you combine these two Pokemon, and Archaludon just becomes completely difficult to KO because you're not dealing 25% damage to it per turn. You're never killing the Pokemon, right? And so Sinistcha Arch like basically means that neutral targets are not going to knock out this mon. The other big like Archaludon innovation that we really saw was with Terra types, right? So we'd seen a lot of grass on Archaludon just to like resist ground, because Landoi again is the best counter to Archaludon in the entire national decks, right? But there's another Terra type that just so happens to just be better, and that's Fairy. It's interesting because Fairy a lot of time is actually not like as strong a Terra type as you'd expect it to be, but with Archaludon in particular, it helps a lot, right? Like you become immune to Regidrago, which is like the best. Regidrago is like the only neutral target like hitter that can like remove Arch. With Fairy, you're just like immune to them on, like it's not an issue anymore, right? Pow Sacred Sword, the only physical attack that can really like deal much damage to Arch once it gets boosted. Well, you can even live that over and over with Terra Fairy, right? And like it doesn't matter that you're no longer. It does like becoming a Fairy type still doesn't impede like your strength into like other physical attackers, because you're just racking up stamina boosts anyways, right? So yeah, this Sinistcha Archaludon really revolutionized the archetype. I mean, it's just weird to think about, because like it's not like it's kind of an obvious pairing, but it just like kind of like took a while for these city teams to really get developed, or for people to just spam them. I think spamming them is the issue, right? So yeah, teams like this, Wellspring, Redirection, Rainsetter, Sinistcha, Arch, Landoi, just great on like Rain, and then just Hands is just the broken Pokemon in its own right. So yeah, a team like this, very good. Saw a lot of usage. That's kind of the story of SCL. There's another team that I had more of a hand in building myself. Let's pull it up. I built this with Nails. There's like 4 versions. Let's see, which one's the original? Yeah, it's original. So this was a bit of a different take. Did not have Landoi. This was more of like a Trick Room mode. The other team had Trick Room as well, but this one played more into it, right? Like you have like really slow like min speed Arch, which enabled you to like do some cool stuff, and then it just played more into Arch. Like the other team has like other hitters, but this just has Arch support, and then Bask is like a fast attacker, and Bask is just silly sometimes. Emphasis on sometimes. I'm not really actually like too much of a fan of the way this one was used on this team, but like it worked. So yeah, these were like the kind of the 2 big Arch teams, I feel like. We had an alternative version that ended up getting used later in the tour. Like Nails used this like same like concept twice. This one's just like a little bit faster. So yeah, Sinistcha Arch, big metagame development during SCL. I think I made my point. Whatever. So that's kind of one thing. Then entering World Cup, which is the next big doubles team tour. Team tours are usually like the way things get developed in DOU. Like individual tours are just not like, they can't reach the same kind of like hype or like attention that team tours get, just because better players play in the team tours. But entering World Cup, lots of stuff happened. And the thing with this tier is it's kind of hard to really tell what's like broken at any given time, especially like post Flutter ban. Like there are so many things that you could realistically run in SV, um, that the metagame can be a little bit cyclical. Like you can see like Pow rising, and then like something like Diance's going to rise again, and then something like Lando I is going to be more necessary. So a really big like test of like how good like these new Arch teams was going to be was like during World Cup. Like how are people going to respond to the trends from SCL? And we actually saw a few more Rain teams built, and many uses of those previous like same like sixes, especially the Z team. That one was like really popular. So for my part, I mostly looked at Kingdra. I actually think Kingdra is like a really cool mon to pair with it. I'll touch more on like this later, but more teams, more Arch teams. Arch Cine just completely broken. I also had a version with Amogus. Later on, me and Kunal came up with Zapdos as a way to like help patch Rain's matchup into both genies and opposing Rain, because actually Archaludon kind of struggles to deal with opposing Rain. At least a lot of the Arch teams that I've built, especially if you don't have like Lando I, you can actually really struggle to remove opposing ones. I digress. So yeah, Rain really proved that it was still a very good team, or obviously it was a good team, but like it remained at the top of the tier, and I think that's like really that longevity. Especially it also had like invites. That's one of the biggest individual tours. Lots of Arch uses there, if I recall correctly. So yeah, it's been a staple. It's been kind of like at the top in a way that like a lot of other top mons and archetypes like kind of like rise and fall. Rain is kind of not for like the last like 6 months, and I think that's really like shown to people that this mon is just like really good. So I'm not really surprised to get this suspect. So yeah, people have been pressuring for this for a while, but things are just different this time around. Like the Archaludons are no longer LARPing with Iron Defense Body Press. They are clicking Electro Shot, which is a broken move. So yeah, very strong archetype. So why am I going to vote ban? So, I mean, I guess I should explain that, yeah, I am voting ban. Like, my thoughts on this mon have kind of always been like it's a little silly. I don't think it's like the most broken thing in the world. Like I think there's like definitely a bit of nuance to this Pokemon, especially because like if we didn't have Lando I, like it'd be like a complete no-brainer. Like Lando I is the only thing at all that makes this Pokemon reasonable. I think Ursaluna Blood Moon can like help, but as well, because like these special attacking ground types are good. Like special attacking fightings just don't exist. That's kind of the issue, right? Like if there was actual special attacking fighting types that were not Keldeo, this Pokemon would be a lot more reasonable. It's really just ground, and like there's only 2 special attacking ground types really in the entire national dex, unless you count Primal Groudon, right? And it's Blood Moon and Lando I. Lando I does a better job at like pinning the Terras of Grass and Fairy by clicking Terra Poison, Sludge Bomb, right? So if it weren't for that, this Pokemon would be a complete no-brainer. But considering we have Lando I that can break this Pokemon effectively, it's a little bit more complicated, right? Especially because I actually think Genies like Lando, Torn, Gold, Ensign, like hands like +1 is like probably the best team. Like you're gonna get consistent results. You can always play like the most variety of matchups with Lando I, Torn. Like it's just good stuff. As long as you're careful about POW and position your tools correctly and use bulky physical Pokemon like Incineroar or Hands, you're gonna be fine, right? But the problem is like it's a lot more difficult to maneuver around Archaludon with these supposed checks than you might think. So people have already made this point. I think there are a few calcs posted in this thread, right? Sandseer Storm 69 to 80%. LOL. Life Orb Sacred Sword. Or I guess not Life Orb. Only like a 2-hit KO, right? Non-stab Earth Power, bounces off. +4, Coltango doesn't kill. Yeah, so like this Pokemon is just very bulky, right? So even the things that like supposedly check it don't really deal that much damage in the long run, right? Especially when you consider like damage is not permanent in DOU. We have Sinistra, right? Like it's just it's much more difficult to remove than you'd actually think. And I think my first point I want to make here is that Archaludon's like the nature of Archaludon's toolkit means that it doesn't have to invest heavily in its offensive stats to be capable of sweeping games, right? That's just a common thing with a lot of setup sweepers, but this is, for context, this is like absurdly invested for an AV Arch. A lot of people run like way more SpinF than I am on this, and it's still not even close to max. So Electro Shot means that Archaludon doesn't have to invest in his special attack really much at all, and gets to run AV at the same time. It's not looking this like a setup move, like the attacking move is a setup move. Like Meteor Beam Power Herb is good. Electro Shot and Rain is even dumber, right? It's even a stronger move, to be honest. 100% accurate, no charge in Rain. Like this is just crazy. But what this allows it to do is have great flexibility to cover its weaknesses with its EVs, right? Heavily SpinF invested, similar to like Hands, right? Like Hands is in theory like frail on the special side, but in practice it's not. It's the same thing with Arch, except Arch gets to set up and attack at the same time. So yeah, Electro Shot gives this Pokemon like great flexibility. The Sinistcha parrying's another thing. The typing's just perfect. Yeah, very difficult to remove. The next point I'd like to make here, in the context of like real world playing around Arch, I saw this mentioned in DOU code earlier. Common counterplay to Arch is like just not as good as it would be. Like Stamina is a very like fundamentally broken ability in the sense that like you get punished for trying to like play positionally around it. Like you stray fake out hits it, you switch in on something with doesn't do much damage, you get boosted, it gets much more difficult to remove, right? So you have to be very careful when playing around Arch. It's kind of unique in that aspect, like in terms of what we have legal. Like Annihilate was kind of like that, like punishes you for like playing the game. Last Respects with Bass is kind of like that. I think I've actually mentioned this last time it came around. I made like a post. I was like, Stamina kind of breaks the game in a similar way to stuff like Annihilate, Bask, like just punishes you for playing the game, right? I'd like to point out this was one of the best Archaludon teams at the time, and it's like a meme. So we've come a long way since this baton pass Schuster team. So I think that the Mon's like unhealthiness has always kind of been there, but it wasn't really fully fleshed out. And this like punishment of like positional play with like the ability Stamina just makes it very good. So that's the Electro Shot aspect and the Stamina aspect. The other thing that I want to touch on here is I think Archaludon's design and the team it pairs on is just a little bit too good of a combination, right? Like, Steel types are already very good on Rain. This is common practice. Like, if you're running Rain without a Steel, you're probably trolling in most formats. Rain likes Steels. Steels like Rain. Like, helps deal with Fire, helps deal with Ground. It's just a good synergy, right? But the problem with Archaludon is it only has two weaknesses, right? Fighting and Ground. Now, when you consider the fact that it's a lot easier to move them on with special attacks, considering Stamina, lol. You want special fighting type attacks or special ground type attacks? Now, I already mentioned that special fighting type attacks basically like don't exist. Like, let's look at the fighting types real quickly. Sort by special attack. It's just Keldeo and Iron Valiant, I guess. They just don't exist, right? Like, it's not easy to remove this mon with special attacks. Like Hell's Keldeo's like signature move hits on the physical side anyway, so it doesn't even help. So we're basically forced to use these special attacking ground types. Now, why is this an issue? Well, when the steel types like only counterplay is a type that's weak to Rain, it also has further incentivization to be used on Rain. That's where the problem comes in, right? Like, Archaludon benefits like a little bit too heavily from the synergy with like Swift Swim mods like Kingdra, Rain mods like Polytoad, even something like Zapdos, in a little bit of a different way. But like, it pairs too good with the water type for something that's only weak to ground, basically, in practice. So something like Lando is so difficult to position into Rain because at the end of the day, it's only really hitting a couple of mods. Like, look at this team. Lando hits Arch and Ensign and loses to everything else. Or it struggles to remove everything else. Like, it could do good damage to like Kingdra or something, but it's pressured heavily offensively. Not to mention Arch can just whack it with like a +2 Dragon Pulse or something, right? So I think for me, it's really the synergy with the ground type that really does it for me. I think it's just a combination of factors that make all the counterplay other than like Lando Eye and Ursaluna Blood Moon like much more difficult. Manual Sun is another real option, but that's an archetype that has separate issues from Arch and is kind of difficult to use anyway. Not to mention, like, if your Manual Weather goes down, Rain just wins the game because you have fire types, right? So make of that what you will. I think that's kind of the main things I wanted to cover. Let me just go back through. I mean, I think these calcs just do like a really good job of showing how defensively bulky the Pokemon is. So yeah, the situation is just different. I think the overall sentiment in the community is a lot different. Like, if people are interested, if you're what another player has to say, I highly recommend you watch this video. It's a bit more organized than my rampage or rant, whatever. I used the wrong word, but I've seen a lot of people that want to vote ban on this Pokemon. I'm not really surprised. Like, that development that we said needed to happen with Arch, it happened. We're here now. So yeah, that's kind of the thing. Yeah, please vote to ban Archaludon. So what? I think other things with this metagame I'm going to talk about for a brief second here. Like I said, Genies is very good. Rain is very good. Rain without Archaludon. Now, it's probably not. This is not super relevant to whether you should like vote ban or anything, because you should only like look at the tier in front of you. I encourage people to not really like think about like what'll happen to Rain. Like, that's not really how like tiered action works or whatever, right? But I think Rain is still going to be fine. Like, you have good mods. I think honest, like, if Arch survives this ban and like, or survives the suspect, stuff like Kingdra really should be explored more. I think this mod like gets written off a little bit too much. The other Swift Swim mons, like Basque, is on paper stronger, but Kingdra's defensive profile and bulk make it a great partner for Arch. And I think it like, if this mod's going to be in the tier longer, I highly encourage people to use stuff like Polytoad and Kingdra. Like, even Pelipper is good. I just like Polytoad more. But yeah, these Swift Swim mods are better than people give them credit to be. Even Basque, even though I'm not the biggest fan of it. But especially Kingdra. So I think Rain's going to be like, okay. Like, you just have to use other steels. Like, Goldengo is like a fine Pokemon on Rain. You just wouldn't use it on Rain when you can use another broken steel type instead, right? And I also don't really think like Rain is like really holding like that much of a valuable place in this tier. There's just a lot of viable archetypes, and Rain's issue is that it's just a little bit annoying for like all of those archetypes. It's anxiety inducing to play against too, to be honest. Yeah, I think bottom line, Arch just forces a little bit too precise counterplay and punishes basically every other form of counterplay. Final thought. Something that's not really talked about, and this is something I actually would be sad about if this mod gets banned. Not like a lot, but a little bit. I actually think Power Herb Arch is a very real set. It's not a lot of use in like Reg H, but it allows like Arch to be played on these teams that don't have like Pelipper, and this is something I've actually messed around with a lot. I didn't end up bringing this team in World Cup, but I brought Power Herb Arch several times in Team Bio. another tour. Um, Especially this team. This is kind of my like power herb arch team with like Terra Electric. I should have changed it from Terra Electric. I got too tempted to click that button, but this is a very real set. Like if you're not using Arch on Rain, this is, don't get me wrong, this is not as good as Rain Arch, but like it's mini Arch, but you don't have to run Pelipper, so it's a good set. It's still a good Pokemon, and you get to run Sturdy too. So yeah, this is a fun set. I also think it's viable. I think it's underexplored, but I'm not surprised it's underexplored because Rain Arch is stronger. But this just lets Arch be used on like manual Rain with Genies a little bit more effectively. This is the one thing I'll be sad about going, but I think honestly even this set is a little silly just because Electroshot is just that good of a move. Basically every game with this team I've gotten to click Rain Dance I've won, for context, because if you let this kind of fast Arch get multiple hits off, the game's kind of just over. And you also just like do fun stuff like you pop Lando at +1 with Draco. So it's another set that in my mind kind of like contributes to, yeah, Arch is, it's broken on Rain, but it's also a Pokemon that's outside of Rain too. I just think people like kind of have forgotten that. Metagame development can be kind of slow in DOU sometimes, but this is a real set. And the thing that like Rain really does like punish hard, or at least Arch, is like the POW stuff. But there's other tools for POW. I think Dancey is honestly an even more complete answer to like a lot of the POW teams. But again, try not to like think about like the potential consequences of removing a broken Pokemon too much. We just gotta look at what's in front of us, right? And I think it's pretty clear that Archaludon's here to stay if we don't get rid of it. And I think SV, like, it's a fine metagame. Like I've kind of like, I've complained about this tier extensively in the past, and I've complained about a lot of tiers in general, but SV is an okay tier. Like it's not like do or die here, but it's just kind of a cringe mod, you know? I think the tier would be better off without it. There's some people that have talked about like wanting to free Flutter Mane, and to be honest, like I totally get it. The tier is really interesting with Flutter around. It just was a very broken Pokemon. And so if we're not going to go backwards, we should probably go forwards and try to make the tier better that way, right? So Archaludon is definitely like the number one piece here that's kind of like an issue. All the other Pokemon have much more like reasonable counterplay. Lando doesn't like POW, POW doesn't like Incin, POW doesn't like Hand doesn't like Lando. There's all these like interesting dynamics that can like play out over the course of tours, but Rain is, ever since SCL, seen like a kind of immunity to that just because it's that good. So yeah, that's it. It's been a while since I recorded the video, so like I'm kind of like not in the flow of like recording, and I kind of like rambled here, but hopefully you enjoyed watching. There's also another suspect going on with Stack Attacka. Might record a video on that if I do enough studying this weekend. That's a Nat Deck suspect. My thoughts are pretty similar to this. I will be voting bad. Different Pokemon, still broken steel types. And also, OSTT is up. I encourage everyone to sign up if they want to play the biggest DOU individual tour of the year. I will maybe be making content about that if I have time. Major caveat. But yeah, thanks for watching. Hope you enjoyed, and we'll see you next time.